Do a review Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chavov. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Boy. This is a real Lomdische Sicha, and the Rebbe comes up with a insight. The discussion is, we know that Pesach is on the 14th of Nisan. You bring the Korban Pesach. But the Torah gives an allowance that if you didn't make the korban on the 14th of Nisan for reasons described in the Torah, then you could make the korban on the 14th of Iyar, a month later. Now, the rule is that the second Yom Tov, the second Yom Tov, the second Pesach, Pesach Sheni, called the 14th of Iyar, is a Yom Tov by itself. And therefore, if, for example, a child was under bar mitzvah, he wasn't obligated in the mitzvahs when the first Pesach was around on the 14th of Nisan, and then he becomes bar mitzvah in between the first and second Pesach, he's obligated to make a Korban Pesach, a Pesach Sheni, because now he's an adult and it's a mitzvah by itself. That means that the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni is a standalone, even if you weren't obligated in the first Pesach, you still will have to make the second Pesach. On the other hand, if you did make the first Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, then you don't have to make second Pesach. But the interesting halacha in the Rambam, which is the discussion of the Sicha, is that the Rambam rules that if the family made a Korban Pesach on the 14th and they shechted for the child under bar mitzvah on the 14th, then he's exempt and he doesn't have to make the second Korban Pesach. That's what the Rambam rules. And the question that we have over here, how could it be that the fact that he was under bar mitzvah still, so he is not obligated in any mitzvahs of the Torah? How could it possibly be that if they did shecht for him in the first Pesach, then he doesn't have to bring the Pesach Sheni? What they did for him should be considered nothing because he was not an obligation at the time. He wasn't obligated at the time. This is the issue here. But the Rebbe's chiddush will be in the end, after back and forth, the Rebbe brings out that even when a person is not obligated, like in this case, the cotton, the minor is not obligated. And still, if we do it for him, and like we said, the Pesach Rishon is connected to the Pesach Sheni inherently, if it was done, the Rebbe brings from the Ragachover, it still counts. Here we're saying if you're not obligated, how does it help? No, it does help when you did something for somebody else. And we bring various different proofs for that. The Rebbe brings from the Bahag and from different halachas that even if you're not obligated, if you've done it, it counts for you. And therefore, the Rebbe explains that the fact that the cotton was counted on and they did the korban for him on Pesach Rishon, he fulfilled his obligation. That explains the Rambam, but we'll have to get to that explanation going through all the details. We're learning the Sicha Lilu Nishmas, our son, Harav Levi Yitzchok, whose first yahrzeit is coming up in just a week from now, actually, in the Parshas Boy that we're learning. I'm giving the shir a week earlier, so it should be ready for the Parshas Boy. but his yahrzeit is on the fifth day of Shvat, which is going to be in this year. It's going to be on Friday. So this should be Lil Nishmasei to benefit his soul. Should have a tzurur nafshi b'tzurur chaim. It's in the proximity of Yud Shvat. So we should only experience open and revealed Bakitzu Baran Roshechna Ofor V'hu B'Seichel. Look inside now, and we'll go step by step. Boys, boy base. Aleph. In Hilchos Korban Pesach, Paskin the Rambam, in the laws of Korban Pesach, the Rambam rules, as af al pi vosa cotton shehigdil bein Pesach Rishon le Pesach Sheni. That although the halacha is that a minor who was under bar mitzvah and he became an adult, he became bar mitzvah, in between the first Pesach and the second Pesach, between Yudalid Nisan and Yudalid Iyar, is Chayiv bePesach Sheni, is obligated to make a second Pesach. And the principal idea is because Pesach Sheni is not just to bring, if you missed out on the first Pesach. The halacha is that Pesach Sheni is a standalone, and you have to bring a korban. The cotton that became an adult in between has to bring the Pesach. While the halacha is Kedas Rebbe, the halacha is like the opinion of Rebbe. As Pesach Sheni is a regel b'fnei atzmei, it's its own holiday, which means we don't need you to be mechuyev in the Pesach Rishon, and you didn't do it in order to bring the Pesach Sheni, but it's its own holidays. If you didn't bring the Pesach Rishon, you should bring the Pesach Sheni, even if you weren't obligated, because you weren't bar mitzvah, you weren't obligated, but still you bring the Pesach Sheni. On the river, ken der chiv from Pesach Sheni chal sein. That's why the obligation of Pesach Sheni is able to rest. Even one who was not obligated in the first Pesach, he can still make a Pesach Sheni. He still is, because it's its own mitzvah. So you didn't do the first Pesach, you weren't mechuyev, but now you're mechuyev in a new mitzvah. So is Yedua von deswegen. But yet the Rambam brings out a surprising halacha. Im shochtu olav berishon, if they did shecht for this cotton when he was a minor at 14th of Nisan, they shechted on him, meaning he was on the Korban Pesach that they were eating. Berishon is potter; he doesn't have to bring the second one. So even though he was a minor, and a minor is not mechuyev b'mitzvahs, still the fact that they shechted the Korban Pesach for him, he was part of the first Korban Pesach, he's exempt of bringing the second Korban Pesach. And that's very surprising. Is Yedua ditmiya b'zeh? So the question, the surprise is known. V'yasfrek der Kesef Mishnah, the Kesef Mishnah asks, Otu cotton bar chiyuva pituruhu, can a minor be part of an obligation or exemption? What does it mean that he's exempt because he has already done it? He's not obligated and he can't exempt him. He should bring the second Pesach. Why? How does a minor factor in that he did something when he was a minor, when a minor doesn't have obligations, he doesn't have exemptions? So doing it on the first Pesach, he did nothing because he wasn't obligating. And therefore, that doing shouldn't exempt him from when there is a real chiyuv. The chiyuv of the Torah is on Pesach Sheni. So the Kesef Mishnah and the Rambam bring them tirus for Rikurkus. He brings the answer that was given by Rikurkus. He says, the Kesef Mishnah brings down for Rikurkus, that Kivon the Rachmon Rabbi Lekotn Sheyishchatu Olav Umimani Noisoi. He brings down a halacha. The Torah says that normally Take, a cotton is not obligated or does not, the mitzvahs don't apply to him. But the Torah did, especially by Korban Pesach, Rachmona Rabbi Lekotten, the Torah included also a minor, Sheyishchatu Olav. The Torah says you should shecht for him. Umemanim oisa, and we can count him. So according to that halacha that he quotes here, that he can become part, even though he's a minor. Normally minors aren't. So this means, that's why he's exempt, nifter hu bekach min hasheni. So that's why the Torah said you could count him. That's exempt him from the second one because he was counted. The Torah made a special halacha for the Korban Pesach, that he is part of the Korban Pesach. So if he was part of the Korban Pesach, you don't have to bring the other one. As the Rebbe brings down, where do we see that the Torah made a cotton part of the Korban Pesach? In 11, that's off from the Posuk, as we learn it, there's a verse that says, Se lebeisovis se labois. You have a sheep for the family. Malamed, what does it mean? The Posuk said the sheep for the family. Well, every adult has to be part and counted on the Korban Pesach to be part of the Korban Pesach. The Torah adds that also the family can be counted in the Korban Pesach. So we learn from this, Malamed, this teaches us that a person can bring the Korban Pesach, and when he shechts it, also for his son and daughter, the minors. So basically, there's a pasuk in the Torah that includes that we can shecht for them, and therefore, in this case, they are included. But the problem is, this is not the halacha, this pasuk. The halacha is, this is a svar in the Gemara, an opinion in the Gemara, but the halacha remains that min ha-Torah, you cannot count a cotton. A cotton is not part of it. So how is this exempted? This quote from Rikurkus from the Gemara is not la halacha. Frag the Rav the Minchas Chinuch. So the Minchas Chinuch asks this, Loit mas konas ha-Gemara in Nedorim. According to the conclusion of the Gemara in Nedorim, and that's also, the Rebbe says, it appears that that's the view of the Rambam, is sell the base of Islam the Iraisa. This that we say that you can bring all the kids to include them and count them at the Korban Pesach, it's not a Torah command, thus haste. As min ha-Torah is nitok in din minu efakoten. In ha-Torah, there is no such a thing as counting for a minor. So therefore, you say that you counted him in, it doesn't help. It didn't do anything because the Torah doesn't count a cotton. Why do we do it? It's blows with the Rabbon. It's only from the Rabbon. And therefore, the Pesach Sheni, when he becomes an adult and he's mechuyev, why doesn't he bring a korban over there? How could he be exempt because of something with the Rabbanon that they did for him, which is not obligated? The Rikurkus answered that he is part of the Korban Pesach as an exception. The Torah made a cotton apart, and the Minchas Chinuch argues that the Torah did not. The halacha is that a minor is not part of the Korban Pesach. So why is it that if they counted him for the first korban, he doesn't have to? Is exempt from bringing the second one. He should bring a chiyuv to bring the second one. So the Rebbe brings down from Rabbi Chaim and also the Tzofras Paneach that there is actually two parts to this that we say that it's not. There's two parts about the cotton. There is one part of an obligation. When the Gemara says that counting the minor is only midrabon, it's not min haTorah, sel beisov is lav deraisa, it's not meaning that you can't count the minor into the Korban Pesach. What it means is lav deraisa, that he's not obligated from the Torah to be counted. However, it is min haTorah from sel beis avos, sel abois. It is that the counting of a minor does count. That is min haTorah. So it's sort of a compromise between what we know that it's not min haTorah, it's not min haTorah, meaning that a minor is not obligated to bring a Korban Pesach, but it is min haTorah that you can count him in, and therefore the Rikurkus's answer would stand. If you counted him in the first Korban Pesach, you don't have to bring a second Korban Pesach. Base. In Chidushi, Rabbi Chaim Wolosow from Rambam, and the Chidush of Rabbi Chaim Wolosow on the Rambam is Mavur. How to sell the base of his lav deraisuhu. This that we're saying that it's not a Torah halacha, that the family, that the minors are counted, that is not a Torah. Hurak le'inyan chiyuva. It's only for as far as the obligation goes. As is nito kein chiyuv oifun av zu makru zayin Pesach ala ktanim. There's no obligation on the father. There's no obligation to bring a Korban Pesach on the ktanim. Aber le'inyan ikar din minui. But as far as the main halacha, which means can you count them? They may not obligated, but are they counted if you do bring them? They are included. That's not that the Torah did say that you can include them. The father has a right to count them onto the Korban Pesach without their knowledge, because a minor has no das, can consent because he's a minor, and therefore the Torah gave the right to a father to include them. The minor himself, who has no das, is not obligated in the mitzvahs, so he doesn't have to count him. He's not. That's lav deraisa. That's what the Gemara said that it's not. The Gemara Nedarim says that's lav deraisa. But the ability of the father to include the son into the Korban Pesach, into counting, that's from the Torah. The father can take him without his consent. You don't need consent. He's a minor, but the father can do it. The Torah was marveh. And upon them rests the halacha that they are counted, and they are the owners, part of the Pesach from Divrei Torah. And therefore, we understand they don't have to bring the second Pesach. Based on this, he answers the ruling of the Rambam. Although minors were not been included in the obligation of Korban Pesach, so Ktanim are not obligated. The Torah didn't give a new halacha that minors should have to bring a Korban Pesach. Cotton is not a one that you can obligate, so he's not part of it. That's what the Gemara said. But yet the Korban Pesach counts for them. Is potter Pesach Sheni, and therefore he is already exempt. Kivon the Kvarkim Akrovas HaPesach u'Mitzvos Berishin, since he had already fulfilled the offering of the Pesach and the Mitzvah on the first and Pesach Rishon on the 14th of Nisan, because the father brought him in, and therefore he's exempt from the second Pesach. That's the answer of Rabbi Chaim. That even though the Gemara says that it's Selaboy is not min haTorah, that means that there's no obligation on a cotton to count. But if his father brings him in without his consent and makes him part of the Korban Pesach, it's his Korban Pesach, and he doesn't have to make a Korban Pesach on the Pesach Shem. And the Rebbe brings down what Sofnes Paneach, which actually goes even further. You say to him, even more than this, the Rebbe says, we find in the Tzofnes Panech the Ragachover, was is mevayer, as seinen voran zwei dinim, wie a cotton can essen for Korban Pesach. He says there are two separate halachas how a cotton can eat of the Korban Pesach. How does a cotton allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach? Is he part of the halacha that is part of the family? So then he's not, if he's part of the family, he's not considered part of the group, but he's eating because of his father, he's eating a part of the family. Then he's not counted on it. But if the father will make him part and appoint him to be part of the members, then he actually can appoint him. So he says like this. And therefore, sometimes the obligation, if it's just as a family member, then he would have to bring another Korban Pesach when he's obligated. But if he is as an individual, then he's exempt. Let's look inside. Aleph. Mitzad dem din, there's two possibilities. Mitzad dem din for Sefer Lebeis office, a set for every family. Was in them oifen werd der Kotten nicht verrechnet von dem Bnei Chabura. He's doing it as a family member, then in that way, he's not considered one of the members over there. When der hat nicht gescheiches zu Akroves Vasiyas HaPesach, and he has no connection to the offering and doing of the Pesach. That's what like the Gemara says there. Said the Beis Office is Labdi Eraisa would be to appoint him as a family member to eat. That doesn't really make him connected to the offering and doing of the Pesach. If he's not connected, how's he eating? Und das was asked from Korban Pesach. So why does he eat the Korban Pesach? He's normal at his bottle ha'av. He's secondary to the father, but it's not his mitzvah of Korban Pesach. We allow him to eat it. But if he is just participating as a family member, that's not Beis Office is Lav de Eraisa in that case. And he can't be counted like he did the Korban Pesach Berishin if he just ate it as a family member. On the other hand, the other option is if the father actually appointed him and counted the minor in the Pesach, was der mit werd einer von the Bnei Chabura, then he becomes one of the members. That's already makes him somebody who has done the first Korban Pesach. And in that case, the Rebbe will say, is when the Rambam says that if you did the first one, you don't have to do the second one because it's like any of the other members. I would say that it's Pesach is Lav de Eraisa in the Gemara. That's only in a case where it didn't make him for a member. He was eating it as part of the family. Then it's not Minat Torah. But if he is appointed, then he is his Korban. And if in this way, if he's doing it as an appointed one, there is a certain halachas that each one who is part of the Korban Pesach must meet. You have to eat the size of an olive, and you have to be bendas. You have to be a knowledgeable person, even though he's a minor. But you need to be a bendas. You need to know what you're doing. So, if we take this way, when we're saying that the father is actually memana you, muzdar cotton zayin, azav was kenesna kizayis. He has to be one that can eat a kizayis because you're a member, one of the counted ones. When a muzana bendas needs a bendas, as opposed to the case where You're just eating as a family member. Whatever you eat is fine. You don't have to be because you're just being batul. So how does this answer? So when the Rambam says that if you brought the first one, the minor, it was counted, he's talking about you counted him as an individual. And then you can be exempt. But the Gemara says that you cannot count, that it's not the Torah. It means in a case where he's just being as part of the family. The Psaka Rambam im Shochat Olo Berishim Potter, the ruling of the Rambam that if you shecht on the minor in the first was Potter, Retzich Nori Nafal when their cotton is given einer from the Bnei Chabura the Minui. That is only talking a situation where he was one of the people of the group. They appointed him. That, yes, Shochtu Olaf, the shechter in him. But Demel is the Asiyas HaPesach Oich zu Libeim is also for him. Again, but when the Gemara says Sepei Lav Deiraisa, that's talking about when he's just eating it as part of the family. So we have here a certain stipulation according to the Ragachover. We see that the minor sometimes could be part of it if his father, he says, celibate always includes the father's right to appoint him. That's according to the Ragachover. According to the Rabbi Chaim, we said before that even though you can't, Rabbi Chaim says less, he doesn't say that the father can actually appoint him to become, but he says at least if he does appoint him, there's no chiyuv, but if he does appoint him, he's fulfilling the mitzvah. The father could appoint him. So therefore, if he did the first Korban Pesach, he doesn't have to bring the second Pesach because he did fulfill the obligation. So both of these answers were basically saying that the cotton has a room of doing min haTorah. But the Rebbe is going to challenge this from Tosfos and from the Alter Rebbe that it's mashma that there is no way that a minor can be part of it. It seems clearly that the minor has no part in it. The only reason, as we'll see, we allow him to eat from the Korban Pesach is because of chinuch, and chinuch overrides the mitzvah, the Rabbanon overrides. But it seems clearly that a cotton has no part. We're going to go through a whole pilpul over here, but I say clearly, but we can learn what we're concluding is that a cotton really has no Torah part in being part of the Korban Pesach, and the Rebbe is going to want to know in that case. So why does the Rambam paskin if you made the first Korban Pesach on him, he has no part in it? The Rebbe's chiddush is going to weigh even when you have no part, it still counts. As the Rebbe continues to learn now from Tosfos and from Alter Rebbe to show that at least according to that opinion, it seems like there is no room for a minor at all in doing the Korban Pesach on the Rishon, and yet the Rambam paskin that is going to be potter from the second Pesach. Why is that? How come?